So, a story of patience. All right. So, I've known since I remember being 5 years old, and I don't know why. I did not grow up in a church family. I always assumed my parents, I think my mom's probably on, and you can say hi, mom, in the chat if you are. Makes me a little more nervous. I think my friends Tim and Loretta might be on too, and they definitely are giving me strength here. Um, I didn't grow up in a church family. The only time we were in church was for a wedding or something, and I don't even remember doing that. Um, but I always felt the presence of God from the time I was 5 years old. I always felt Him walking with me. It's not something I talked about to anybody, or I just thought it. That's what it is. That's what it was. I thought that's what who God is. Um, but as time went on, you're growing up and kids are talking, and nobody's talking about God walking with them. But I always knew God was walking with me. Um, I remember you had mentioned music, Doug, and we're going to talk a lot about music on this show. Music has been the vehicle to my faith since the very beginning. Music is a way for me to express, and I can't play yet. I am learning the guitar. But
Hey, good
um,
job.
other people's music can say things that I can't, and it moves me, and it's been the most powerful force in my life. And um, I remember being in, and this is going to be interesting coming in Northern Michigan. So there's a local college here, Northern Michigan College, and when I started taking classes there, I was in the library and I would sneak. I wouldn't sneak. I was sitting there studying and looking at Campus Life magazine and CCM magazine. If you're familiar with those, but it was on a kind of over Sports Illustrated or something. I was too. I wasn't. I don't know if I was embarrassed. Um, I don't know what it was. It was just I wasn't comfortable with people seeing that. But I remember seeing ads for Christian colleges and Hope College and Azusa Pacific out in California. I thought that was so amazing, and dreaming of a time and day in my life where I can explore that more. And there have certainly been times in my life when I have explored it more than others. Nothing like what I've been through in the last year, but so I always knew God was walking with me. I always had constant conversations with God. I had a, like you and I are talking, Doug, I talked to God that way. Um, and through all kinds of things. Now, I did pray for some ridiculous things at times. I remember praying for a Brown Super Bowl. We all know how that went. Um, but yeah, I didn't quite understand my faith in Christianity and everything, but I was always comfortable with my relationship with God. I always think, at least my mom, I think I sensed that she always felt guilty for not. I think she always sensed that in me, and not. I think she felt guilty for not exposing me more to that. But I could be wrong, Mom. But yeah, it was always there. And as life went on, there was ups and downs and challenges and so forth, and illnesses and times. But there's been so many times that I was just talking this with somebody the other day. I've been given so many chances. Um, there's times in my life that is so clear to me that God is speaking to me or giving me signs, and sometimes it's speaking to me. Um, and it's there's no other way to explain it than God's talking to me and giving me these signs and so forth. And getting knocked down in life and always landing on my feet, I just always knew I was going to land on my feet. And it wasn't anything that I was doing. It wasn't anything that I had inside me, because I didn't have it inside me. I felt like I didn't have it inside me to lift myself up and persevere and so forth. My mom just said I wasn't wrong on. She sensed that in me and wanted to expose me to more. But um, I appreciate that. But yeah, just comment on that. I always assumed my parents believed in God, and they were they were believers, but we just never talked about it. But yeah, just always getting back up again. And there was just, especially now as I'm 50, about to be 54, there's just so many times that I was given a second chance. And
Mm.
to me, there's just no explaining that. And there were certain times in my life that I was closer to God. After my divorce, I went through a period where I felt like it was the closest I'd ever been. I started going to church in Chicago at Park Community Church that I really loved, and had some friends there, and had some great memories there. But as far as the church goes, and this kind of goes into Doug's book, it wasn't purposeful, but I ultimately always had a problem with organized religion. I had this personal relationship with God who was, it's like my invisible friend. Like, it was like he was always there. And I'd go find a church because that's what you're supposed to do. I mean, you're not really a true Christian if you don't go to church, and stuff. So, and there was times I did, and I enjoyed it in Chicago. I helped start a youth ministry at a Catholic church, and I had great memories and so forth. But ultimately, I'd run into hypocrisy that I just could not handle. And that's part of the reason for the show too, is there's times I want to call on that and ask you questions about certain things and how it's explained or how it's handled and so forth. But ultimately, all the churches I've ever been to, I walked away from, or at least took what I could get from them and kind of removed myself from a distance, I guess, from them, because the hypocrisy got to me. But there's always been this battle, this teeter-totter of, I've always felt like God was asking more of me. Not just that he had a plan for me, which sounds so cliche, but not that he had a purpose for me, and not that I was going to conquer the world and change the world or anything like that. But I always felt him calling to me, and I was scared. It was fear. Fear got in my way of it, and I retreated. And no major rebellions and things like that. It's just I went about my business and didn't think about it or whatever. I do remember where the first big change from this was, well, there's one when we moved from Traverse City down to Indiana, and this will be emotional. When I moved down to Indiana, where my mom and dad are at now, and just kind of helping my mom and dad transition. I wasn't doing anything. I was 25 or something, and 23 or what, I don't know what it was, but it was just, I went with them, not really having many options and so forth. And being down there, and kind of isolated, no friends around, and just my parents and I love my parents. We get along great. We've got so many great memories and so forth. It's not that, it's just, there was something missing. There was just obviously something missing, and it was God calling me. And I remember being downstairs in the bedroom and just, again, talking to God and just being overwhelmed by his presence. And I was listening to a lot of Christian music at the time. And, at the time it was Stephen Curtis and Michael W. Smith and Amy Grant and all those, but the early days of DC Talk, and that moved me. And there was, God, I'm putting some stuff together, and that word rise, I heard it then. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I didn't. That's new. All right. Oh my gosh, I can hear it clear as day now. There was a moment laying downstairs and listening to a Michael W. Smith song, and I had to go. I had to go make my way in the world. That's funny that I said that with Michael W. Smith. That wasn't even intended. God was telling me to rise, and move, get moving, because I was stagnant and sitting still, and yeah, I was being called to rise. So I left, and so that was the first really big kind of turning point in my faith. But again, life happens, and you move on, and stuff happens, and the next big one was after my divorce, and that was a biggie. Divorce was not really that big a deal for me. My ex-wife and I had a fine marriage, but we were very different people. And I sacrificed a lot and lost a lot because of it. And so when it ended, I wasn't upset about that. And sure, it was sad. It was sad about it happening, but there was something else happening in my life. And now I'm in my own apartment, in my 40s, alone, don't know what I'm doing. And this is going to sound really bad. My mom's going to hear this for the first time. And maybe I said it to you before, but I had these knockdown, drag out fights with God in my apartment. Literally just like he was right there yelling and screaming, and I can feel it. I can feel how I was angry, not necessarily at him. And this is going to sound bad. And I don't mean this in the way it's going to come across. I wasn't suicidal, or anything like that, but I was just praying for him to let me go.
Mm-hmm.
I was just it just went on for, I don't even know how long, weeks. And I would pray, just pleading with him to just let me go. Cause he always had this hold on me. He always had this hold on me that he just wouldn't let me go. And finally I was tired, and I knew he was never letting me go. It wasn't going to happen. And again, it wasn't that I was going to hurt myself or anything like that. It wasn't about that. I just wanted that gone. I just wanted that calling, that pulling gone, because it hurt. It hurt. So yeah. So at that point I was tired, and I surrendered. I just surrendered that night and just vowed that, I knew that I wasn't going to get the answers, or didn't need to know answers, didn't know the meaning of life, didn't know what the plan for me was or anything like that. I wasn't caught up in any of that. And that's not what I was asking for. I was just asking to be released. But I surrendered. And just from that moment on, I said, listen, I don't know if I'll understand or ever understand, or maybe I'll understand when I get to heaven, but I'm going to follow where you lead me. And I remember making that declaration and living my life from that point forward as best I can. Obviously there's hurdles in the way and obstacles in the way between then and now, but for the most part, I've gone where he's led me. Hence coming to Traverse City from California and so forth. And so again, I got past that point, and there were high points and low points in my faith and so forth. And and then we got to May.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not gonna tell the story of actually what happened. Now it'll be for another episode or so, but unless it comes out. But I had a heart attack and died in May, and since that time, and there's much more to that happening, and I was gone for a while and had an experience that I'll share some other time. But since that time, and I say that I was sent back. I don't know if that's the right words, and I don't mean it to sound ungrateful or anything else. And when you hear the full story, you'll understand. But since that time, there's been a lot of identity issues, not understanding. I gotta take a sip. Not understanding who I was. It wasn't even about, I don't know. The heart attack caused some cognitive issues that I was struggling with, that I couldn't think the same way. I had some memory issues that were kind of acute issues where I would forget things, but there was something very different the way my brain worked and has worked since then. And I was limited how I functioned in the world was different. It was like I was plopped down in somebody else's body and looking through somebody else's eyes, and trying to now navigate this differently, and not being able to do the same things I do, not having the same capabilities mentally. I wasn't as sharp. I wasn't as quick. I had to literally think, and still do have to think about left and right. And part of that is just I'm getting old. I get that. But there's been some serious cognitive issues that have caused serious identity problems for me, because that's always who I was. That's how I functioned in the world. So I'm still dealing with that. But then you put the spiritual side of things, and really, trying to figure out what all that was for and why I was sent back, and not understanding it all. So it's been a struggle. And the story I chose was the story of patience. And the reason I say that, because God's been waiting. He's been waiting on me this whole time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's so clear now that, that he's been patient. He's been waiting patiently for this time. And, whenever I was ready. And I don't have the answers. That stuff hasn't been revealed to me. Again, doing the show, being called to do the show is part of that, and trying to honor that calling and not shy away from it. This isn't comfortable for me, but I'm getting more comfortable with it, and more comfortable in my faith, and more comfortable talking about God, and more comfortable sharing my story. This isn't what he has planned. It's just the starting point of me getting to where he needs me to be. But he's been patient all these years, these 53 years, through everything that's happened. And that's kind of why I call it the story of patience. And the story I'll share later kind of brings this a little more full circle. And I know there's a lot, and I said a lot that may not make sense. At some point I will share the story. That's a really hard one to get through. And I feel like that story is, I need to tell that story. And God's called me to tell that story. It's not now. It's not tonight. So that's kind of my journey. But I will say this, I've been struggling with those things, and I feel, again, not having the answers, still being confused to why I'm brought back, but I feel God working in a way that it's never happened before. I feel it every day, and he's telling me to be patient. And he's preparing the way for me, and I'm going through the things I need to go through. He's forcing me to focus on getting healthy before I can even do some of the things he's asking me to do, because I haven't been able to do things physically. I'm getting there. I now have a little more stamina, a little more strength, but I'm not there yet. And so this has still all been preparing me for whatever is next, whatever that may be. But it feels different now than it did a month ago, for sure. I feel like I'm seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. And I've always known, even as much as I was struggling through all this, and I was struggling, I didn't know. I mean, I have these babies. I'm actually going to text them, because you're going to get to meet the babies, for them to come in. Let me just do this real quick. Maybe I won't. Yeah, I will. What was I saying, Doug?
You were struggling, but you had these babies. You had to.
Yeah. I had these babies, and so thankful that I was in the environment I was. I was at for people who don't know, we camp 6 months of the year, and I was. Now, it actually happened the night we got to the campground, and God put people there in that environment for me to heal, in that beautiful nature setting, and watching the birds and having that time and that peace and serenity, and then also putting the people there that I didn't even know. And if they're listening, they know. I ran into a gentleman that was also one of the camp families that had a heart attack like I did some years before, and having him there and having somebody that had been through it and gone through some of the similar things, that was so clearly God putting them there, and we've
Yeah.
become great friends and so forth. But you know, I was sitting there and going through all this stuff, and just I'd sit in the chair because I couldn't move much, and just like, why, and they've heard this, so you know, it's not that I didn't want to be here. And when you hear the full story, you'll understand. You'll understand why I'm saying this. But I have these two amazing babies who are the light of my life, and I just, you know, again, it'll make more sense in another night. But I was struggling. I was truly struggling. But it was so clear that God was working and giving me that atmosphere, providing those people, opening up my heart to listen and be guided, and all those things. And from that point till now, and what's next. But even in those darkest moments, is what I was going to say. Again, can you tell why the show is going to be long sometimes? The point of that was the darkest days of my life, and again, being thankful that I was here to with them and see them grow up and all that. But I knew the other side of this. The other side of this, me getting past this and whatever was next for me, I knew the other side was glory and greatness and joy and peace. I never doubted that. I knew that I had to go through stuff right now, and I was going to listen and be patient and let God do its thing, not get in my own way and try to force things or manufacture things. I knew without a doubt the other side of this was everything I waited for.
Mm-hmm.
Everything God intended for me was on the other side of this. It is on the other side. And I now see that. I see some of it starting now with this show, with you.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, I'll let you comment while I regroup here. So,
Well, yeah. And I remember those moments of watching you, Jay, you know, when you called to first share what had happened, and just the transition between then and now is palpable, and just in terms of, you know, how far you've come, you know, and asking questions and really wanting to figure out who you are, which is, you know, be a big part of what the things that we talk about in relationship to identity, who we are in Christ, who, you know, there's personal things, you know, that I struggled. I've had identity crisis throughout my life, even as a believer, even as a pastor, someone in full-time ministry. And it's a struggle I think everybody goes through to varying degrees. You know, and people are trying to figure that out. Why, not just the why am I here thing, but, you know, who am I supposed to be? And so I think, you know, as we kind of dissect that a little bit, it's going to be very helpful, you know, for other people who are listening with the same questions, still trying to figure those things out. So I'm excited about that. You know, this is your faith journey is obviously has some very different aspects to it, that, you know, as you share your full story will, you know, will really make a lot of sense. But also at the same time, you know, that tug's been on all of our lives at various places. I mean, when you were sharing the story about your knockdown dragouts with God, I was reminded, taken back to maybe I was like 14, 15, I think at the time. And something that God showed me, he had to take me back in time and say, you know, I want you to remember this. And I remember this so clearly, standing in front of my bathroom mirror, just hating life, hating my life, crying and bawling my eyes out, and doing the same thing with God. Why? You know, just the ugliness of living in a divorced family and a dysfunctional family because of that. You know, just the things I put myself through. I'm not going to say anybody else put me through it, but stupid decisions that I made and all that kind of stuff where, you know, things weren't working out the way you want them to as a teenager. I think that's probably true of every teenager ever. But, you know, but having that, you know, vivid memory of me standing in front of this bathroom mirror, just like, you know, my eyes just burned red and soft and snot and just, and being mad at God. And I remember Jesus taking me back there and saying, he showed me him standing beside me. Now that at the time, that was not a reality for me. I had no concept. Like you were saying, you always knew God's presence was with you. Me, at that time in my life, no way. And, but when he took me back there and he showed him standing beside me with his hand on my shoulder and just showing me that he was there, and being able to see it in hindsight. And the scripture that came to mind was, he said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. That in one of my worst moments, probably as a, kid who may have entertained some ideas of not wanting to be on the earth any longer, uh, of him saying, I was there in the midst of your struggle, in the midst of your hardship, in the midst of your pain. I was there. And that brought such comfort to me looking back on my life. And, because there are times where, it's kind of like the footprints in the sand, right? Where it's like, Jesus, there's only one set of footprints. Where were you? And he's like, that's when I was carrying you. And so, I can listen to your story and how you struggled and look back at my own life at a very different time, obviously as a young teenager, but seeing the same, or having an understanding looking back, hindsight's 2020, that Jesus was there, God was there with me. And he really probably was the reason I made it through without doing anything dumb. And that I was still here at 17 to make a decision to surrender to him. Yeah. So, your story is amazing, and it's only going to be more amazing as we tell more of it, but for another time.
Yeah, definitely another time. Again, some of the things I've said tonight probably don't make sense because you don't know the full story, and I apologize for that. It's just that's a different level that I'm able to do right now. So that's a little bit about our journeys, and I'm again sorry I went so long, but total epiphany or whatever you want to call it, when that moment in Indiana, it's so clear as day that's the word I heard. That's what I was. Yeah. Wow, that's tough. I mean, I don't know. So we're going to transition out of this, and we'll get back. I want to get to our next quick segment, and then I want to get to Doug's book. I hope I do this justice. Again, we're going to dive deep into Doug's book and other episodes and so forth. We're just going to kind of introduce and tease a little bit now after this next segment. But I want to apologize now to Doug, because I am a little bit of a mess. So
you're good, bro.
You may have to cut me off there and say what you need to say. So we are going to do a next segment called, again, for lack of a better title, questioning. I thought that was a good word about questioning our existence, questioning our faith, questioning God, questioning ourselves, questioning our relationship with God, all these things. But if you can think of another title, we'd love to know. And also, I do see there's several people online, many people online. I'd love for you to say hi in the chat, so we can kind of acknowledge you. My mom's still on, and Diana's still on. They've put some stuff in the chat, but I'd love for you guys to say, or if you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear them. But we are going to do a segment now, which we hope to kind of develop over time, about just some questions that I have, other people have, that I'm going to record people asking questions, or when people write in or put stuff in the chat that you want to hear from the pastor. Kind of his take or his answer, his view on something. We'd love to hear from you. When I thought of this segment, it came from my son, who I'm going to bring in right now. He's probably making all kinds of noise here. So this is Cubby. This is my Cubby. Hey, can you make a not so mean face there? This is my Cubby bear. And when I thought about this other day, I asked him if he had any questions, and he kind of said one real quick, and I kind of dismissed it. And then I thought about it for a second, and it was interesting. So why don't you ask your question to the pastor?
Hello. I was just wondering, why can't humans be immortal?
Good question. And there's not necessarily a short answer to this one, but I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can.
And Doug, I'm going to just stop you real quick. They can't hear, so I'm going to actually nudge them off the screen.
All right.
We'll catch it on the replay because the way
Good to see you, Cubby.
is. But so yeah,
All right. So that's a great question. That's a deep dive question from.
that's what I thought too. I kind of dismissed
yeah.
it, and I was like, oh wait a minute.
Yeah, that's a big one. And I would say the short answer is that we were actually created to be immortal. That was God's original plan from the beginning, was unbroken fellowship with him for eternity. I always say it this way: we are eternal spiritual beings in a temporary physical existence.
I like that.
And yeah, and so I'll say it again just so everybody can grab a hold of it. We are eternal spiritual beings in a temporary physical existence. The problem is a lot of times we just get sucked into being so focused on our temporary physical existence that we think that's the normal, when in reality, the Bible talks about us being created for eternity. And so that was God's intention from the beginning. We screwed it up. I don't want to sit here and blame Adam and Eve. Everybody's like wants to get to heaven and slap them on the back of the head. I think we would have done the same thing. I would, if I was in the garden, I would have made the same mistake. I know my own selfish tendencies. I know my own, stupid decision-making history. So, but the reality is when Adam and Eve fell in the garden, it shifted, at least the fact that we were no longer going to have unbroken relationship with God throughout eternity. Now there's a decision to make. We're still eternal beings. But God now has to go through the process of redeeming us and rescuing us back into that relationship with him so that we can spend eternity with him. So from a standpoint of I always want to say, I want to do my best, even though I know he doesn't need it, but to protect the character of God from people who, would say, oh God, why did you make me if, at some point I could be separated from you? Well, I'll say this and then I'll cut myself off. Otherwise I'll talk for the next 2 hours on this, which is there were two trees in the garden, right? The tree of the knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. God said, don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He didn't tell him to eat from the tree of life. But had man made that decision to not eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil and eat from the tree of life, he would have had unbroken fellowship with God forever. But the reason God gave a choice is love always requires a choice, and God is love. And so in order for us to choose him, there had to be a choice to not choose him, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so that's what he wants out of relationship with us, is for us to choose him. So that's why I didn't make robots. That's why we're not angels. He already made some of those. They still had choice as well. Obviously, we know for a third of heaven, it didn't end up well. But so God did in the beginning want to have unbroken eternal fellowship with us. That's it. That was his plan. And he had to redeem our mistakes as human beings for not choosing him in relationship. So it's a great question, but I want everybody to hear that in their heart, especially if they ever thought, like my wife did, and it's another story for another time. She at one point said, Jesus died for everybody but me. God redeemed that personal situation for her. But a lot of people may feel that way. They may feel like, well, my life has been hard, or, I don't know why I had to go through this, or, all that kind of stuff that we were even talking about amongst ourselves. You need to know God chose you. In the beginning, he chose you. He chooses you now, and he says it's not too late. You can spend eternity with him because that was his plan from the beginning.
Yeah, I think we're going to be diving into this many more times, and there's a lot of questions, and so those are some of the questions I had coming into this show. So thank you for answering. That was beautifully put. Yeah, when I brought it up to you, and you were like, "Yeah, absolutely, that's a good one." So, yeah, thank you for that. I want to say hi to
Yes, sir.
Karen. My friend Karen commented on that. It's nice to hear from you too, Karen. I appreciate you joining us, and I'm sorry for making a blubbering fool out of myself. Juji? So we have one more quick question. We'll try to make this one quick because we do want to get on to Doug's book, and then maybe we'll run out of time to share my stuff, and I won't have to. So this is my Jujubee, my firstborn, my beautiful bear cub, and she has a question. You want to ask the pastor?
One of Daddy's favorite songs has been Graves to Gardens, and I'm not quite sure what that means.
All right. That's a good one too, because that happens to be one of my favorite songs as well. When I first heard that, I was a mess for like a week. It's all I listened to. Uh, Partly because Brandon Lake kind of reminds me of me back in the day. But
Love him.
yeah,
I
yeah,
love
oh
him.
yeah, a phenomenal artist. And, so when that song came out, it really, I soaked in that for the longest time. I still, it's on my playlist.
I love
It's,
the energy of the video. I mean, that's what
yeah,
started it for me last year.
yeah.
Actually, it was a year ago yesterday that
Mm,
song came to me because I posted it on Facebook, and I loved Brandon Lake. I loved the energy of everybody on the stage, and it was just like, it's like, yeah, it spoke to me, and I didn't know. I loved the song. I was moved by it, but it didn't, it was great. And then after the heart attack, first song I played was that, and it hit me a completely different way. And it was just so clear that God was preparing things for me many months before and bringing that song to me and bringing music back to me. Because without that, without Elevation particularly, and Brandon Lake, I don't know if I
yeah.
would have survived it. I don't. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No, 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 not
that's a
at
very
all.
significant thing for me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And, I mean, just, I think this song calls to the depths of who God wants us to be and what he wants to do in our lives. So for me, it's this clarion call, and it's a call for us also to come to an understanding of like what God is capable of doing, right? And so I'll dig into the lyrics just a little bit here, right? Especially in the bridges, right? When because he's at the beginning, he's talking about, this is what God's done for me. But then it just goes so much deeper, right? Where it's like, you turn mourning into dancing, you give beauty for ashes, you turn shame into glory. You're the only one who can. You turn graves into gardens, you turn bones into armies, you turn seas into highways. You're the only one who can. The impossibility of what he's describing in here is what just gets to me and gets underneath my skin in such a good way. Where he's saying, who else can do that besides God, right? And in specific, where the graves into gardens, right? When we think of graves, when we think of either a graveyard or a cemetery, you don't think of life,
yeah,
um, and what better example, obviously, than Jesus rising from the dead, you know, proving that God has the power of life over death, and He can turn what seems like, the darkest, gravest situations, and He can turn it around for good. He can make something beautiful out of something that seems like maybe an ugly scenario, if you will. So for me, just coming into agreement with those statements, no matter what is going on in my life or no matter what situation I find myself in, it gives me hope. And you have to have hope. The hope is what our faith shines off of, right? We're called to live in faith, but in order to exercise our faith, we have to have hope. The two go together, right? That's why it says there's faith, hope, and love, and the greatest is love. But faith and hope are tied to each other, and so to hear this, kind of remind us of, in whatever situation we find ourselves, we're never lost. We're never in a place where God can't redeem it, can't restore it, can't resurrect it, because that's who He is and that's what He does. And so I love this song for that reason, because I can't listen to it and not at the end of it be like, all right,
Yeah.
there's nothing too difficult for God.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yep. You know, we'll dive more into this, but just I felt sitting there at the campground after the heart attack and hearing that song for the first time, I was just like, holy cow. It's like, it was so clear that song came to me. He brought it to me prior to prepare me.
Yeah.
But I just felt, and then the next song I got from Land & Break was Come Out of This Grave. So
Yeah.
the two of those, because that's what I felt like God was doing. He was turning my grave into a garden.
Yep.
And it's just, anyway, I do want to say that in the details of the YouTube, this YouTube event and Facebook, I put a link to the playlist that allowed me to do this show and allowed me to survive those times, that has Graves to Gardens and a whole bunch from Elevation Worship and Toby Mac and a whole bunch of other things. It's a playlist of probably 50 songs long.
Awesome.
That just, I listen to it every day. It's every day I listen to these songs to motivate me and help me speak my words to God. And they have another song, Jireh, which may be the greatest song ever made. And you have to watch the video. To me, it's like, it's the most powerful thing ever to me. They have a new release this week. Same God. I've just been breaking down all week listening to this stuff. It's crazy. But I have an incredible playlist on Spotify that I have a link to in the thing. So